Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. One of the big challenges that we face across the country is varying pH levels out in fields. We're going to focus on fixing the high pH zones on today's show.
Well, if you've already started harvest on your farm or you already harvested a crop this summer, you're probably looking at your yield maps going, whoa, I've got some bad areas in some of my fields, but why? We want to talk a little bit today about why the low yielding areas are low.
Well, one of the bad things that may be out in your fields is our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this weed later in the show. But first, here's our farm basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
In today's Farm Basics, we're going to talk about how to pull a soil sample.
I had a conversation with a farmer this spring, and he came in and said, Brian, I love your Ag PhD soil test app, but I don't know about you guys talking about, hey, I can sample 500 acres in a day. I can't even sample 40 acres hardly in a whole day. And I said, Larry, you're in pretty good shape for your age and everything. The guy's probably 60, 65 years old. I said, you absolutely should be able to sample at least 300 or 400 acres in a day. What are you doing? And he goes, well, I'm going to your grid points. You know, we're doing 5-acre grids on our farm. And then I'm going all around the grid pulling soil cores. And I said, there's your problem. Today we want to talk about how you should pull a soil sample. We don't want you walking around in just random spots in the field pulling your grids. Yes, we want you to pull a few cores at a grid point, but here's normally how we would suggest you do it. Let's say you're in a four-wheeler or you're out sampling in a pickup. Drive right to the grid point. Get out of your vehicle. Pull 2 cores on one side. Pull 2 cores behind. 2 cores on the other side. 2 cores in front. There you go. You've got 8 cores, dump it all in the bag. Don't have to spend time mixing anything else. The lab does that now. So it's very simple, very quick, very easy. The other 2 keys that I would tell you is keep your soil probes straight up and down, not at an angle, and always go to the same depth, whether that's 6 inches, 4 inches, 12 inches, whatever you pick, always go to the exact same depth. That way you'll have a representative sample.
All right, why are we talking about grids? I guess the big thing here is you want to have points that you can go back to year after year. That way you can track performance, you can track what's going on. If you say, well, I need to build up my potassium level in a soil, for example, you can see, well, one year I'm at 1% base saturation potassium. Now I'm up to 2%, now I'm up to 3%, now I'm up to 4%. You can keep following up in that spot. If you're moving to different spots all the time, it's hard to have any repeatability with what you're doing.
The point is use GPS and mark the spots. So you can have zone sampling, you can have grid sampling, whatever, that's up to you. But the point is we want you to go back to the same spots year after year or however often you sample, just so you can track what your progress is over time.
So let's say that you're not a farmer and you say, well, you're talking about these great big fields. What about me for my lawn or for my garden? It would be the same kind of thing. You want to pick spots that you can go back to all the time. Maybe you say, well, I'm going to pull one right in the middle of my front yard. That's fine. You can find that roughly that same spot or within a foot or 2 of that exact same spot year after year and do some sampling. We would highly recommend this rather than just going to the store, buying a bag of fertilizer and hearing from somebody at the hardware store that says, well, this will work for your lawn, this will green it up. You may be putting on something you don't need, or you may be putting on way more than you need. It's important to do a soil test to find out, what do I actually need out there so I can do the right thing for my crop or for my lawn and for the environment.
But I mentioned earlier pulling 8 cores. So 8, 10, 12, something like that, just pull multiple cores. In other words, don't just go pull one little spot of dirt and that's your entire sample. You want to have a few cores so that way you have a more representative sample of what's actually there. You didn't just hit one spot of high fertility or one spot of exceptionally low fertility. You kind of have the average in that area.
Well, soil tests are important and they can help you learn how to feed whatever you're trying to grow. But one thing that will help your plant take in more of that food is keeping weed competition away. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show.
Nodulation. It's essential for nitrogen fixation in soybeans, but how can you help it happen in your fields? Monsanto BioAg offers inoculants that answer that question. microbial seed applied solutions that work to establish high populations of rhizobia in your fields, helping with optimum nodulation and increased performance in your soybeans. Learn how inoculants powered by nature can help you at monsantobioag.com/inoculate.
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
Leading the charge in strip tillage for more than a decade, the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm today.
We love the quality, we love the construction. We're looking forward to working with Morton in the future.
They have this down to a science. They know exactly what you want. They know how to make it happen. It's an easy process.
I would definitely recommend Morton. From the first time I met the salesman to the last nail that the crew put in, it has been a positive and professional experience.
I'm so happy I found Morton because they just make the job so easy.
Find the building of your dreams at mortonbuildings.com.
The Guardian Air Twin Spray Nozzle from Hypro produces a twin spray pattern with air inducted droplets for superior coverage, even in dense canopies. Be effective and efficient with your spray application this season with the Guardian Air Twin. Hypro, helping you spray better.
Take a look inside any rotary combine and you'll find single rotor technology. Technology Case IH introduced over 35 years ago with the axial flow combine. But unless it gives you more bells and whistles with fewer belts and chains, more power using less fuel, it's not an axial flow. Because while the heart of every rotary combine beats red, only Case IH gives you the power to do more.
Right before the show, Darren and I were having a little talk about low yielding areas on the farm, and Darren just said something along the lines of, well, it's really important to know where the low yielding areas are. And I said, well, that is important, but I think the most important thing is to know why the low yielding areas are low. We've got to figure that out. And so when you're going along this fall with your combine and you realize, ooh, I was at 250 bushel corn and now I'm at 150, well, just a bad area in the field. That's the way it goes. If you want to get better on the farm, you got to try to figure out why. So that's what we wanted to talk about today. What are the possible reasons why that low yielding area could be low, and how can you figure it out?
Let's take a couple of scenarios here. First of all, let's say the crop is still in the field. If the crop is still in the field and you're noticing with satellite imagery or your observations just on the ground that something's not right with the crop here, you still have a chance to do some digging, see what's going on with that root system. You also have a chance to look at the top growth on the plant. Now, if there is some sort of disease problem, if the leaves are still somewhat green, you may be able to tell what that problem is. Once the combine rolls through, all that visual evidence goes away. So it's a good chance right now to look and see, well, why didn't the soybean rows fill in? How come they didn't completely canopy in this little zone versus that zone? When the crop's still out in the field, you can check.
That's why we think satellite imagery is just incredibly helpful, because it's basically like getting your yield monitor data in advance. So now you actually have time to go figure out why you had a problem. And that's the reason why we're talking about this today. Because if you're stumped this fall, when you go through with your combine, you have your yield monitor and you hit some bad spots, you can't figure out what's going on exactly, you got to go back to the drawing board next year and say, you know what, I need satellite imagery. Maybe I need to get a UAV on my farm and get some pictures, just little aerial shots once a week or something like that, so you can track it through the year. Those areas will start to show up in a lot of cases, and then you've got to do the painstaking work of going out there, doing actual field evaluation, looking at your crop, and like Darren said, in many cases, digging up some plants. You also should consider doing plant tissue analysis, pulling soil tests from the really bad areas. So it's important to know where those bad areas are, but once you know that, now you've got to go that extra mile and figure out, why do I have a problem?
So in soybeans this year, for example, there are a couple of things that popped up. Soybean cyst nematode, root knot nematode, Nematode issues were prevalent. And we saw many guys just looking at something's wrong on the satellite image, or I don't see crop canopy, doing some digging, sending in some nematode tests, and finding out that's what the problem is. The other thing that we saw was disease this year, and it could be white mold, especially in the upper Midwest if you're in an area that got lots of rain this year. Whether you've harvested or not, depending on which disease it was, you may still see it out in the field. Okay, now let's take the other situation of I don't have crop in the field anymore. Like I said, you may still see something in the residue. You may also just target those areas and do some digging. You can still see some things on the root system, like heavy rootworm pressure, for example. You may see stalks that were goosenecked. Even if there's only a stub of that stalk left, you could still see it. You could still see that the roots are chewed off, those types of things. So just because the season is over in those fields doesn't mean you can't do some digging.
The big thing I wanted to stress here today is it's hard work to figure out why you've got the problems that you do. And believe me, we have the same issue on our own farm. We've got spots that are not yielding well. So we need to do tissue samples, we need to do soil samples, but we also have to dig up roots. We've got to try to figure out during the season where we have problems and actually walk in the field, because otherwise it's really hard to pick out weeds, insects, and diseases late in the season. So certainly some of that stuff might be evident when you're harvesting, but in a lot of cases it's not. So all we're trying to say here today is, yep, it's great that you got these nice pretty maps showing you where you have yield problems. Now let's take the next step and figure out why. And if you can't figure out why this year, you got to be determined next year, hey, I'm going to get satellite imagery, or I'm going to have UAV shots or something. So during the season you can identify where the bad areas are, go out there and figure it out.
One thing that may still be standing in the field so you could figure out the problem easily is our weed of the week. But solving that problem may not be so easy. We'll show you how later in the show.
And now we have Jenny in the field talking with Farmer Dave.
Dave, how is your season shaping up?
Well, I used the starting lineup that my agri-liquid coach suggested in furrow, and the plants jumped right out of the ground. We had some wind damage here, but I called my agri-liquid rep. He came out and suggested a foliar application of Ferterrain. It perked right up.
So you're feeling good about finishing out this season?
Absolutely. Agri-liquid is my championship team.
Thanks, Dave.
So far, looking behind the machine, I'm thoroughly impressed with them. Compared to the older concaves we were running, we were finding about 40 grains, and we put these new ones in it, and it's hard to find one.
After the break, I found out about these concaves. While we were down, we put these concaves in, and it was like a different machine. I'd say we probably saved 3 to 5 bushels to the acre. I probably tripled my money just by putting these in.
Dealers, repair shops, and other ag parts resellers, this message is for you. Looking to save money on your parts purchases? Parts Express can help. We have over 3,000 popular items for tractors and combines priced at a level to save you and your customers money. In this tough ag economy, who wouldn't want to save on parts? Parts Express prides itself with old-fashioned service and easy-to-do business with environment. Go to parts-exp.com to see our parts offering and become a Parts Express dealer today.
In today's market, growers deserve products that bring true, measurable value to their farm. My name is Wade Barnes, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Farmer's Edge. We believe the only way to understand value is to experience it yourself. Try our integrated data solutions with no commitments until May 2018. I know we can make a difference on your farm. Your data is your asset. Own it and use it.
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
Fixing low soil pH may not always be inexpensive, but it is pretty easy. But fixing high pH is another story.
Well, I don't know, Darren. I mean, fixing high pH really isn't that bad, but it may take a lot of time. Whereas fixing low pH, you can do that very quickly. Here are the real keys when we start talking about high pH soil. Number one, let's figure out why did it get high in the first place. In a lot of cases, what we see is poor drainage. If you have poor drainage, what's going to happen is your moisture can't leave like it should. It can't filter down through the soil. It's going to come to the soil surface. When it evaporates off the soil surface, it leaves salt behind. Your salt levels are going to be raised. Quite often your sodium levels are raised, and very likely your pH goes higher along with all that. This doesn't happen overnight either. It might be over a 50-year period you've been wet, and now you've got a pH of 8.0. What do you do?
Well, it's really a nutrient imbalance, Brian. You look at low pH soil, we've got excess hydrogen out there. That's easy to get rid of. In this high soil pH situation, we have excess sodium or excess magnesium. Those ones are tough to get out of soil. That's the real key here. And you talk about drainage. Yes, if we can get drainage improved so we could flush those out, that would be good. That's one way to think about it. How do I get rid of the bad? The other thing we think about is how do I raise the good things to try and get my soil back into balance?
Okay, so it all starts with improving your drainage. If you can get tile in the ground, then over time, hopefully your soil pH is going to come down with the right cultural practices.
Wait a second. What if you already have tile in the ground? Then what do you do?
Well, it might not be close enough together. We deal with a lot of farmers in, for example, Minnesota, North Dakota, even South Dakota, where the cation exchange capacity is 30 or 35. Well, that means you have ridiculously heavy soil. We'll call heavy soil 20 cation exchange capacity. If you're at 30 or 35, that's 50, 70% higher than what we would already call heavy. So I'm just trying to say, instead of the 50-foot or 70-foot or 100-foot spacings you have, you might need 20 in some areas of the field. So if you've got a bad high pH spot, that's probably telling you you don't have enough tile there.
And we see this because there are soil samples that we look at in those regions from a generation or two ago, and the pH was much more neutral. So this can definitely change over time. It's not, well, my pH has always been A tier. It probably hasn't. There's probably something that you're doing to cause that.
All right, so Darren mentioned sodium and magnesium. If you have excess sodium, you have excess magnesium, that's a big problem, and that's a cause of high pH soil. How do you get rid of those? Well, you turn them into a salt. Salts are leachable, so they will flush out of that soil with good drainage. How do you turn them into salts? Well, you're going to probably have to put some sulfur out there. Let's say you put out gypsum, that's calcium sulfate. The sulfate could bind with either the sodium to form sodium sulfate or magnesium to form magnesium sulfate. Magnesium sulfate, by the way, is Epsom salts. So either way, you're going to turn those nutrients into salts, you can flush them out, and over a longer period of time, you absolutely can lower your soil pH.
So I'm listening to Brian, just like you are there, thinking, okay, here's how we change things. That sounds like it's going to take a long time. And then I remember, oh yeah, my brother has zero patience. He wants to see things change right now. Okay, Brian, so what is the right now change answer?
One of the most simple things you can do is put on a whole bunch of elemental sulfur. Now, we've done this on our own farm, and we've taken low 8s for pH down into the upper 5s. In fact, we did go too far by putting 1,000 pounds of elemental sulfur out. I'm not saying that is very cost effective, but all I can tell you is this. We've taken some bad, poorly drained soil, super high pH, spent money on tile, spent money on elemental sulfur, and almost immediately we turned that ground around and started doubling yields. So maybe try that on a small scale, and maybe try lower rates of elemental sulfur to start with. All I can tell you is elemental sulfur does fairly quickly lower pH, just depending on the solubility of the elemental sulfur you buy.
I find it very interesting because we farm some ground that our great-grandpa farmed, grandpa farmed, dad farmed, so fourth generation farming some of the same ground. And it was interesting the advice my grandpa gave my dad, and then my dad gave us on some ground, hey, don't spend too much money there. It's just tight, sticky ground. There's no fix to it. And what he really meant to say is there's no inexpensive fix to it and no super quick fix to it. Now, we did invest a little money, we did invest a little bit of time, but we have been able to turn some of this ground around. And it's something that you need to think about. What is the cost of acquiring new ground? How easy is it to find new ground? In many cases, it's much less expensive, and it's a sure bet if you're going to work on ground that you already control. So take some of those spots on your farm and deal with them. Find out what the problem is by doing some good soil sampling in those zones, and then look at what you can do on a small scale first, and experiment a little bit, but do your experiment and actually go for it. That way you find out in 1 or 2 years' time, okay, does this work? Yes. Now I can repeat that on other areas of my farm.
Okay, 2 other things that I'll mention here real quick. Ammonium sulfate also can lower pH fairly quickly. I prefer elemental sulfur, but ammonium sulfate could do it as well. Make sure you're testing your soil. If you already have excess sulfur, then maybe just fixing drainage and everything will flush through. The other thing is there is one other cause of high pH, and a lot of times that's just, hey, we're now farming subsoil. We had major erosion issues, we're farming subsoil. How do you lower that pH? You just create new topsoil. That's not going to happen overnight either. You need to use manure, you need to use cover crops, you need to reduce tillage or even go no-till. Do those types of things and then get all the rest of your nutrients, get everything else in balance, and over time you'll see that pH start to come down.
High pH spots on farms can certainly bring down yields, and so can weeds like our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to stop it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Our Weed of the Week is Swamp Smartweed.
It's different than the annual smartweeds like Pennsylvania smartweed or lady's thumb. We're looking at a perennial weed here. With Swamp Smartweed, the biggest thing that I see as a difference from those other smartweeds, besides the fact that it's a perennial, is that it's often hairy. So you'll see some hairs out there that you just won't see those on the other types of smartweed. So when you see a perennial weed, what do you need to do? You need to use a herbicide that's going to get down into the root system. Now, your first thought may have been, well, tillage, let's till them up. But tillage is often not the best answer on perennials.
Yeah, if you can get a systemic herbicide, that's often much better because with the perennials, they've got a big root system, you chop them up, they seem to come back, so tillage a lot of times isn't the answer. We would suggest a high rate of Roundup, keep your water volume down a little bit, but a high rate of Roundup. If you were in non-crop areas, would 2,4-D or dicamba work? We find 2,4-D isn't the best on a lot of the smartweed species, dicamba is a little bit better, but either way, we're talking about a perennial smartweed here, not an annual. So it's not going to be the best, but if you did it multiple times per year for a few years, you probably eliminate it.
There are really no in-crop solutions other than crops where you could potentially use dicamba at a pretty decent rate in crop.
Or Roundup or Liberty.
Yeah, or potentially Roundup. I wouldn't say Liberty, Brian, because that's just top growth control on a perennial weed like this.
It is. So yep, you're just going to burn it down. That's going to be it. Well, that's it for our Weed of the Week, Swamp Smartweed, but stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
In life, when you put the max in, you get the max out. It's no different for your corn, which is why 40 years of effort have gone into proving that Instinct and N-Serve nitrogen stabilizers do more than just stabilize nitrogen, they maximize nitrogen, so your corn gives you the max in return.
Let's take a look at our picks for the championship season. We've got 10-34-0.
No. I don't want to talk about them. I want to talk about this Agro Liquid team. Take a look at this lineup. They got it all. The talent, their players can meet any challenge on any field. The coaching staff, the best I've seen.
So that's your pick? No discussions?
Nope. Agro Liquid is the team. They're going all the way to the championship.
N, P, and K. They're critical for a healthy crop. Improve their availability and your yield potential with QuickRoots Microbial Seed Inoculant. QuickRoots technology contains 2 powerful microbes that can help improve access to key nutrients, and it's available in an easy-to-apply formulation. Simply mix it directly into your dry planter box and your seeds will be covered. Learn more at monsantobioag.com/quickroots.
The main goal of Harvest today is to get what you harvest. With the RPR system, you can have no rotor loss.
Customer satisfaction that we're getting for every single one we sold is just impeccable. Being able to use one set of concaves, there's nothing else on the market that compares to it.
So far, looking behind the machine, I'm thoroughly impressed with them. I'd definitely recommend them to another farmer.
The major thing was stopping rotor loss, and we've already done that. Getting companies to help me is my big thing right now. The thing works, and we're very happy with what we've been doing.
Are you looking for an easy way to apply dry powdered products to your stored grain? Do you want to use the applicator recommended by industry leaders for products like Diacon D and other dry powder products? Changing Time CT applicators successfully apply a diversity of products quickly, easily, and accurately. The innovative CT applicators are designed to give you the most accurate application of products such as talc, inoculants, fertilizers, and other dry products. For commercial use or on the farm, you need the applicator industry leaders are using. CT applicators for the changing times.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
Dry corn in the field leads to an increase in shatter loss. We'll talk about how to deal with that problem in today's Iron Talk. With shatter loss during corn harvesting, there are a couple of obvious points to make. First, harvesting at 20 to 24% moisture reduces harvest loss tremendously. In an ideal world, that's when we'd harvest everything because you maximize yield and minimize problems at the same time. Secondly, every kernel that doesn't make it into a combine is a potential volunteer corn plant in your field for next growing season. The weed competition costs you yield. The weeds themselves, volunteer corn, cost you money to control. Now, if you're continually running into problems with grain getting too dry in the field before harvest, there are different fixes available for nearly every kind of harvesting machine. The first step would be to speak with your equipment dealer for upgrades or modifications you can make to your specific brand of harvesting equipment. Secondly, there are aftermarket fixes advertising up to an 80% reduction in shatter loss at the header. If you don't think you can afford to fix things, just stop and consider the economic loss that you're seeing in the field right now. 2 kernels of corn per square foot equates to about 1 bushel of yield loss. If you're losing 3 bushels per acre on 1,000 acres, that's a $10,000 loss. And this doesn't even include the expense of a volunteer corn herbicide to control the problem next season. If you'd like to figure out for your farm exactly how much loss you've got, just get a 1-foot square and use the Ag PhD harvest loss calculator. Just type in how many kernels of corn you're counting in that 1 square foot, put in your price of grain in your area, and it'll tell you how much loss you're seeing per acre. Shatter loss is a serious problem in corn, especially if your corn gets too dry this fall. Do some harvest loss counts on your farm and look into the fixes to put this lost income back into your pocket. That's all the time for today's Iron Talk, but now back to the show.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
If you're looking to expand your farm's grain handling, you want everything to be fast and efficient. The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. That's fast enough to fill a semi in 6 minutes. Plus, our hood is designed to gently direct the flow of grain straight down, keeping your crop in condition. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
We hope you've enjoyed our show today. If you're looking for more agronomy information, I know you would also enjoy the Ag PhD radio show. We're on Sirius XM channel 147 each weekday at 2 p.m. Central.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
There are as many living things in a handful of soil as there are people on planet Earth. But what do they do, and how do farmers work with them to raise successful crops? Beneficial bacteria, fungi, and other microbial creatures are being used in the production of nearly every crop. To learn more, visit rnmf.org.